Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to today's Techstrong Learning Experience brought to you by Synopsys. My name is Cody, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We've got an exciting panel ahead. First, I need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. So if you look to the right side of your screen, you'll notice there are a couple of tabs, and this is where you can engage with us. The first one is the chat tab. So I'd like you to start warming that up for me by letting us know from where you are joining. If you have any questions, you can put those into that next tab that reads Q&A. We like to keep them there so we can keep track of them and make sure that we address them toward the end of the program. Next, if you jump over to that polls tab, you'll see there are 3 polls that are already open. We'd really like you to fill those out for us early on in the program so that we don't need to go through and read out the whole question. We'll just look at the answers. And we will also have a couple more polls that we'll launch throughout today's discussion. So please do give us your feedback there. Of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around to see if you're one of our winners. The topic of our discussion today is where will DevSecOps shift next? And I'm joined by Chai Bhatt, Security Solutions Manager at Synopsys, and Satish Swargam, Principal Consultant at Synopsys. So Chai and Satish, thank you both so much for joining me today. You want to go ahead and take it over from here?
Thanks, Cody. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us today. And as Cody mentioned, today we'll be talking about where will DevSecOps specifically shift next. I've been in the tech SaaS software industry for a while now, and change is truly the only constant. It seems like every year there's something new, and things are constantly changing and adapting. And there's a lot of innovation in the industry, and if you don't keep up, you get left behind, and you become ancient very soon. So in this era of constant change and innovation, what will happen to DevSecOps next? And we'll kind of touch on that. But before that, we'll also kind of see how DevOps came into being, and then DevSecOps came into being, and where we are currently right now, and where we think things will go next. So without further ado, let's get started. Here's the agenda for today, and this is what we'll be covering. We'll briefly talk about the market dynamics, what's going on in the market, why we're talking about what we're talking about. Then we'll talk about some of the challenges, specifically challenges in reference to implementing security into a DevOps program. Then we'll talk about some best practices of some of the essential elements that we have seen in a successful application security program, in a successful DevSecOps program. We'll cover those. And as part of these best practices, we've seen that managing application security risk within your software security program, you essentially need to kind of categorize security into 3 buckets. The first step or first bucket is the plan and design. The second step is to integrate your testing tools into your CI/CD pipelines. And the third step is obviously to optimize your DevSecOps program. So we'll talk about those, and then Satish will get into some success stories of how he has helped customers and clients successfully implement DevSecOps in their organizations. So let's talk a little bit about the market dynamics, right? So why are we here, and why are we talking about application security right now? This graphic that I show is from a very recent study done by Forrester. They published towards the end of last year the state of application security, and they saw that the top 3 ways your organization could get attacked was through your application. So the top 3 were obviously the software vulnerability exploit, a third-party / supply chain breaches, which are become very, very frequent in the last couple of years, and a web application exploit. So, applications remain the most common attack vector, and it's not just Forrester. Studies have been done by Verizon, by IBM, and they show almost the same thing, that the applications need to be protected. And what's happening right now is the way to protect applications is the trend that we're seeing in the industry is shift everywhere. But before I start talking about shift everywhere, let's talk a little bit about how we've gotten here and what's happened in the past. So as you probably know, 20 years ago, there was little to no security in your software development pipeline. Security was almost like an afterthought. So you would kind of do pen testing, after your build was complete, almost like a health check. Before the application was put into production, you would do pen testing and that would be it, right? Most often than not. Then, about 16, 18 years or so, it was determined that if you actually shift left, if you move security to the coding phase of the SDLC, and you do static analysis, say, in the coding phase, and you catch vulnerabilities early on in the development lifecycle, if you catch them and you fix them, it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot faster to find and fix these vulnerabilities early on. So that's how we got into shift left, and this was about 16 or 18 years ago and so on. But since then, since shift left, things have changed quite a bit, especially in the last 5 years. We as a industry have gotten more connected. Everyone's more connected with mobile phones, especially with the pandemic as well. We have a more dispersed workforce, and with IoT as well. Even devices like your refrigerator and other industrial devices are coming online as well. So connectivity has increased significantly. The other things that changed is basically the complexity of applications. So, back 20 years ago, applications were very, very simplistic. Now, one application, especially an enterprise level application, is extremely complex. You could probably have multiple code bases, different programming languages, various microservices that comprise the application, different APIs, and so on within an application. So the complexity of the application has gone up drastically as well. And the third thing that's changed is obviously applications are more extensible. So, agility, you can put together applications on demand, but, by putting together different microservices and kind of spin them up and add to them and so on. So they're more extensible. So the connectivity, the complexity, and the extensibility of applications has basically made shift left into shift everywhere. Where now vulnerabilities can creep into your application development process anytime in the software development lifecycle. The attack surface has increased significantly as well because of the connectivity. So because of these changes, you essentially have to do security testing across the SDLC. So, we've seen in the last couple of years that any good application security program, they perform the right application security testing. It could be SAST, DAST, IAST, pen testing, at the right time, anywhere and everywhere in the SDLC, right? So as soon as there is enough of an artifact, an artifact could be requirements, code, configuration files, scripts, APIs, and things like that, right? So as soon as you have an artifact that's available, you test it immediately upon creation, and you test for characteristics such as quality, security, compliance, reliability, resilience, and so on. And you don't just test it once, but you test it as often as you need to. Okay, but here's the challenge, right? So fundamentally, if you're trying to improve your velocity, release velocity, and your release frequency, the more testing you do, the more friction you provide in the SDLC. So obviously, there's a fine balance. So you're going to have to balance things right, just so that you test at the right depth and the right amount of breadth. Just when it's necessary to test, and you don't overdo it. And you can do that intelligently, and Satish will be talking about that shortly, so I won't say much in that area. So shift everywhere is this trend that we have seen in the last couple of years, and that's just permeating across the industry right now. What that is doing is that it's putting a lot more responsibility on developers to understand, learn security testing, and implement security testing in their development pipeline. So what does shift left do in terms of challenges that it brings? So these are some of the challenges that we see, right? So as I mentioned, there's more of a security responsibility on developers. And traditionally, when I went to school, I learned how to code, but I was not taught security. And even now, if you go through a computer science program, traditionally you're not taught security. So security is kind of an afterthought, even in the education process, right? So developers inherently are not very familiar with security as such. Maybe a handful are, but not everyone is. And they have more responsibility because you're essentially doing security testing all across the SDLC. So they have to have some understanding of security and how to do some basics of security testing. One of the challenges is that security is afraid of losing control on the testing and the policies, enforcing policies and making sure that you're compliant from a security perspective, your SDLC is compliant. Security is afraid a bit about losing control in a typical DevOps scenario because it's all about releasing code as fast as possible. So fine, developers learn how to test, right, and how they should do SAST, DAST, and IAST, and so on within the pipeline, how they should integrate these tools, run the testing, implement the policies and the gates, and so on. But what developers also lack is they do not understand how to prioritize the vulnerabilities that they're getting. So, your testing basically gives you a laundry list of vulnerabilities. Which of those vulnerabilities are the real deal? Which ones are false positives? Which ones are important to your use case, to your business, to your risk profile? How to prioritize vulnerabilities? How to remediate those vulnerabilities that are detected in order of priority? They just don't have that guidance at all. So they look upon the security team to provide that guidance. The other thing is, on the right, you'll see that there's a periodic table of DevOps tools, and this periodic table is constantly changing, right? So there's new tools being introduced every weekly, if not monthly, right? So there's constantly new tools being added by different organizations. And if you look, there's a security section, it's in green in this periodic table as well. So there's a bunch of security tools in this periodic table that are also constantly changing and constantly being added to. Different companies are providing these security tools, and sometimes they're proprietary, sometimes they're open source. There is no kind of standardization. They don't really talk well with each other. A lot of times they conflict with each other. They probably show you the same amount of vulnerabilities over and over again. And they generate a ton of vulnerabilities. And sometimes they generate a lot of false positives as well. So there's a lot of noise in the testing results that you're getting. And just integrating these tools into your pipeline does not necessarily guarantee insight or control on having security embedded in your pipeline. The other thing we see in the industry is that there's over automation, right? So you're trying to go release code fast. You're trying to release code as frequently as possible. But a lot of times we've seen that there's not enough controls in place. And if there are controls in place, maybe some of the security gates are not functioning correctly, or they're not turned on even. There's a lot of broken workflows, and risks tends to propagate even without you knowing it. So it gets introduced. So as you go faster, a lot of times security is compromised, unfortunately. We see that a lot in the industry. And the fourth challenge we see is the technology-driven life cycle, right? the TDLC. And Satish has some really good insights that he's seen from his customers. He interacts with customers on a daily basis. So I'll let Satish share these insights on what he sees from a TDLC perspective.
Thank you, Chai. That was very wonderful. And Chai gave a very good introduction of what it is, what are the next challenges or things we see in DevSecOps. So, with regard to the technology-driven life cycle, what we've seen is customers have been looking at innovative ways of programming. Like they're trying to introduce new languages that are out there. And it does become a challenge for DevSecOps, especially when you don't have tools that are mature enough to scan for vulnerabilities. So one example we have seen is like blockchain. There's an object-oriented programming language called Solidity. It's used for the smart contracts in the Ethereum platform. So things like that. Now, if you look at some of the more mature security testing tools, they may not support them. So how do you bring about these new technologies into the organization for development? Because the organizations are looking at new innovative ways of developing software. They try to pick on the next greatest and latest technologies that is out there and try to enable developers to be more innovative and also try to deliver software that is cutting edge or leading edge technologies. So those things have to be looked into. Typically, when we looked at the DevSecOps platform, we look at a paved road approach, right? We say only the certain list of technologies that can be tested thoroughly or can be tested for security, for example, should be allowed. But no, that's not the case. You want to retain your developers, you want to retain your resources. So you also try to come up to help enable bringing in these new technologies. So those are the things. How do you bring in these for scanning into your already existing DevSecOps pipeline? So those are some of the challenges we are seeing, and our customers have been asking for how they bring in this technology-driven lifecycle, especially when they have a research phase, when they're looking at uh, investing and bringing on these new technologies. How do you start supporting it? So that was one example. There are other examples too. Maybe some of the security testing tools do not support. It may be something like Clojure or Swift, Kotlin. We know all these, some tools have caught up and they're trying to scan it, but there may be other tools which also do similar things but not have enough coverage. So one of the important things you have to look at in the DevSecOps pipeline is, do you have enough coverage for the programming languages or the different technologies that are using? Have you tested for security thoroughly? Because that is a huge risk for the organization to bring on new technologies and to test them as well. So those are the things we have to look in addition to bringing on incorporating them or embedding them into the DevSecOps process or to help enable secure software development lifecycle. So with that, I would like to get on or move on to the AppSec DevSecOps essentials or the DevSecOps transformation. But before that, I would like to just have a poll and see what do you think are the top characteristics of an effective DevSecOps program. I'll just give maybe half a minute for you to respond to this. What do you think are the top ones?
Satish, which options do you think will be the top contenders? What are your top three?
Well, that's the topic I'm going to delve into later. Many of these are important for an effective DevSecOps program. I will talk about it. And it all depends on which customer you're talking to and what is the business they're supporting and what is it they're looking for, what are the driving factors for them. But I know the answers may be different for each one of you. So here are the results. We see, wow, continuous security testing, awesome. So you're looking at the automation pretty much. That is the top one, it looks like. There is compliance, some of them looking for. Okay, the next one was security metrics. Awesome. And I've seen security gates. These are all very important. I will talk about these in the forthcoming slides too. Very good to know this information. I know you're in a DevSecOps a session, and I think you've just picked the continuous security testing as a popular choice. So with that, let's look at what our customers are looking for. We have customers that are pretty mature in the DevOps program. They have brought in several orchestration tools to help enable continuous testing or do integration testing in the CI/CD pipelines. Um, I know there are others who are just starting from scratch and seek assistance on building an effective DevOps pipeline or bringing in the culture, and also they're looking into embedding security into their DevSecOps pipelines. So when we look at transformation and customers are looking for, you have to look into the people, process, technology framework. So the important things over here is, of course, it comes from DevOps culture itself. So when we say DevSecOps culture, it is about working with the different stakeholders, making sure that there's less friction between the stakeholders, such as the developers, operations teams, and security teams. So that is one of the things we focus on all, how to enable that, how to reduce the friction, and also have like a shared responsibility model. So you got to look into see who's responsible for those security activities, who needs to be accountable, who has to be consulted and informed. So all these are very important to have an effective DevSecOps program. So in addition, you also look into the application security champions. They are very important um, security experts that are part of the development team. So you may have to have a satellite from development teams to come and represent themselves, and also have them these security champions work with the different stakeholders like security teams and be the liaison for the development teams as well. So you need to have a good representation of security champions amongst the development teams. So now we also talk about developer enablement that we need to look at. It's not just enough to just scan and throw out a bunch of vulnerabilities at developers or operations team and ask them to go fix those issues without providing the right expectations to them. Yeah. So I have seen in some places where we just said, okay, we were for compliance reasons, we were told to scan it. We started scanning, and then there you go. The very first baseline scan, we had several thousands of vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed. And the developers had no clue on what to prioritize on or how to go about fixing those. So sometimes, you get into a bad habit of saying just for the sake of addressing those issues, you may just hire somebody to go and start auditing them, even without providing proper training. So we have seen that. And that is not a good way of enabling the development team or um, making sure that you have a good security posture in your organization. So what we say over here is come up with a plan, and you need to provide the right remediation guidance and training for them. All these go hand in hand to have an effective security program, not just a DevSecOps program as such. So with that, we'll go on to the process aspects. We have seen, the organizations are just building software at a very rapid pace. They use the agile development methodologies. You have like sprint cycles, bi-weekly sprint cycles happening, and you have releases going on on a very frequent basis. How do you catch up or keep pace with the rapid speed with which the software is being delivered? We need to ensure that you have security scans happen at the right cadence. It has to happen at the right time, and also be provided. The vulnerabilities have to be provided to the developers at the early on so that they can address it before it gets released or it gets deployed to production. So all these things need to be looked into. There's a great challenge for security teams and organizations to build in security as they're building the software to deploy or to meet with the business needs for the customers. So with that, we also have some compliance reasons. I know some of them have responded in your poll that compliance also is a very important aspect. So for those, just not for compliance, even for a better security posture, you may want to look into security gates. This is like sometimes taken as something as prescribed, but depending on the organization, you may want to see if you want to really start enforcing security gates or not. You just cannot say, apply the security gates when there are thousands of vulnerabilities to be addressed. You need to come up with a plan. So that has to be phased in. So what we call it is crawl, run, and fly. So when you bring in these um, processes and methodologies into your organization, what we've seen is we just have a phased approach. The customers are using the phased approach to deploy these and enable or have these security gates in place, where it actually looks into the security policies defined by the organization and automates it in their pipeline to see if it can go to production or not. And that goes hand in hand with the go, no go decisions, where those can be automated as well, depending on the needs of the organization. And also another thing to look at is the vulnerability management. As Chai was mentioning, you have so many tools scanning, and several times when you're scanning the same application using the different tools, what happens is you have duplication of these findings. And you also have to look at centralized visibility amongst all the stakeholders in the organization. So having an effective vulnerability management strategy is important too. He just mentioned about false positives. How do you triage false positives? What tools do you have to centralize that and have the developers, operations, and security teams work hand in hand to bring down the number of security vulnerabilities they have in the applications? So that also goes hand in hand with the risk management and what is the risk that is posed to this business, and also how they need to prioritize and use that effort to remediate or apply mitigation controls to bring down the risk for the application that they have deployed. So security metrics is another aspect that has to be looked into too. Even before coming up with an DevSecOps program, I would say the first thing you have to look at is security metrics. Without having a good or effective security metric strategy, you wouldn't know how to measure the success of the DevSecOps program. I've seen some places where you just go start on with some CI/CD pipelines, you integrate the security testing tools in it, and you would never know if it was effective or not. Because what happens is sometimes our developers are very smart too. They just want to go and fix the moment first thing they see. They don't want to be in the radar, so they just go and try to address it before anyone else notices it, right? But the moment you present those vulnerabilities to developers and they start fixing it, and if you haven't measured that, how effective it is, it's very hard to judge the success of the DevSecOps program. So I would say, even before getting anything in place, define the security metrics for the organization. Start with that and start measuring it. Then you'll see how effective the program has been, and you'll also be able to look at opportunity costs for the organization and what they need to invest into from that is coming out of these security metrics. Then we get back to the technology. What does it mean in terms of automation? How can you automate the various testing activities you have, like traditionally threat modeling or penetration testing or manual activities? It needs experts to do those. But can you bring in security testing or automate those and have continuous security testing? I know in the poll, the number one was that you picked was continuous security testing. So that is very important in a CI/CD pipeline for automating security testing as well. So the things that are included for security testing or that can be automated are static code analysis or static application security testing. That is scanning your source code for vulnerabilities. Then you have the software composition analysis that scans for open source vulnerabilities, license, and operational risks. Then you also have automated DAST, or the dynamic analysis on runtime applications. There's another one you can use is interactive application security testing. There is container security. You run on container images uh, to verify if the image is secure or not. So another one is infrastructure as code. I know we're speaking about TDLC, and nowadays what you have serverless architecture. You have infrastructure as code. Maybe there are organizations deploying applications without actually coding as well. So what do you do with that? How do you secure those? So those are the other aspects you have to look into and see how you want to really ensure that there's no risk for that application. You may not be able to blindly take um, a software that was developed by third party and start using it like a wizard, and then have it generate code and deploy and use that application. What kind of assessments do you need to do for those, and what does it mean for the DevSecOps program you have for continuous security testing? These are several challenges that we need to be looking into, and that also develops very well into Shift Next. Well, it depends on what is that you're looking at, what you're trying to secure, like for example, the new technologies, the no code. Those are the things we have to look into too, of how we would like to have DevSecOps address those issues. Now with that, look at what it means for organizations. So here's one thing we do. We do maturity action plans. So what it means is, when a customer comes to us, we assess them for the maturity of their DevSecOps program. There may be customers who are not used DevSecOps at all. They're new to continuous security testing, the DevSecOps, and so on. Or other customers are very mature in DevOps, as I said, and all they're looking for is bringing in security into their CI/CD pipeline. So what happens in this phase one is there's an assessment made. We look at all the processes, how the security vulnerabilities have been looked into, what is the governance, several aspects. We looked into software security initiatives when we are assessing them for the maturity. So what we do is we assess the current state, then we provide recommendations for the future state and come up with a roadmap on how they can plan it out. For example, it could span out for 2 years or so, what it needs to look like and what they need to prioritize on. And then in phase two, what happens is we give them a reference pipeline. We look into the various compliance requirements they have. What is the governance and processes that they have in place in the organization, and how to help them come up with this, as I said, the reference pipeline for it. There was also security metrics I mentioned about, like what are the key performance indicators? How do you measure those? And then what are the things you need to enable in terms of for the developers or improving the security posture for the organization? And also, what are the different training initiatives we have to look into for secure development? So all these things we look into in phase two. And then once we have the reference pipeline, um, in the phase three, we select candidates or pick applications um, that can follow the reference pipelines. We have seen some organizations use several different types of orchestration tools. They may use a variety of things like Azure. They could use AWS, Jenkins, Circle CI, and so on. And they're also using different source code repositories, different technologies, and other aspects. So we pick candidates that can start using the reference pipeline, um, pilot it out, and verify the integrations like software, the static application security testing, DAST, or the software composition analysis, and so on. So, and as we're doing that for the pilot phase, we integrate these things and then try to optimize it or fine tune it so that that can be scaled in the later phase. So as part of this phase, there is also automated onboarding scripts that are written so that it can be scaled for self-service or automated onboarding of these applications for testing for security of the applications. So that is when in the phase four, there is enable the teams to start scaling it and run it. So that's where we initiate the transition from security team to development teams as well. So now the shift is for development teams to start looking at those results. They're self-service, and they can start looking at the vulnerabilities that are in the application and look into means of triaging those findings. So all these happens, and that also goes in hand once you have scaled and run it. You have the risk management that you look into for the entire program, software program. So now looking into this, how do you integrate and automate, right? We spoke about shift everywhere. So I spoke about the security metrics. The first thing we had to look at is what is the organization's application security program objectives and metrics. So once those are defined, the security policies can be written. Maybe they're written for compliance or to improve the security posture for the organization. And based on the security policy, what we do is come up with a policy engine to run the just-in-time security tests. So what this means is trying to integrate any of these different testing methodologies we have, like the software composition analysis, static application security testing. If there are mobile applications, then you can look into mobile application security testing. I coined this as CSA, which is container security analysis, if you're wondering what that is. And then there's IAST, interactive application security testing, and DAST. So the things that are not grayed out this time can be automated. If you see, the other ones are out-of-band activities. So for example, the threat modeling, code review, pen test, and risk analysis are pretty much out-of-band activities, which at this time, we don't have a means of automating it. But again, now when we speak about what's next for DevSecOps, those are the things we should be looking at for automating it. How can we automate threat modeling, for example? That's another thing, like threat analysis, threat modeling. Or what about security requirements? Can you automate security requirements in a DevSecOps pipeline? We have seen some customers who have done it effectively. Like they can generate security requirements based on the software or the change request that is coming in, and just incorporate that into their software development lifecycle. So those are things we can further look into for at DevSecOps as well. So, and then once all these tools are integrated, then there's another thing we had to look at is centralized vulnerability management. So you need to pick effective tools that can do like look at the results from each of these security testing tools and then be able to correlate, prioritize, and you need to have an effective means of tracking the remediation, mitigation controls, and also provide visibility to all the required stakeholders in the organization. So with that, now we'll see the different integrations that are possible. This is some of the things we have enabled to. Like you can have software starts with what the source code repository, right? When you start, when you have already designed and when you're starting to implement, it starts with the source code repositories too, when you're starting to develop and commit code. So there are things in the source code repositories you can do, like for example in GitHub or Bitbucket and so on, where when you're having pull requests, you can put in checks to ensure that it's not violating the security policies. So you may run some static code analysis over there. So we look at all those things that you can provide as actionable feedback. And even, for example, in the pull request, you can also enforce code reviews to be done before it gets merged onto the main branch. So those are things we look into for the integrations. And then there are other items that are not found after the merge as well in the CI/CD pipeline, where you start creating tickets. For example, it can be Jira tickets, Git issues, or the Azure boards that you look into for managing those findings that you get from security tests that are done after the code has been merged. Then one more is chat ops integrations, where it's the ability to notify the developers when there are critical vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities that are violating the security policies for the organization. So instead of, there are two approaches. One is having security gates, where you typically we say, yep, you need to have security gates before it goes to production. Before software goes to production, you need to look for um, the security policy and only and make a go no go decision for that. But then what about in the development pipeline? Do you still need to have security gates? Do you need to break the build um, before you deploy to the higher environment or not? So those are things you can look into, because nowadays developers are like coding rapidly, or uh, developing software at a very fast pace. So uh, one of the things we recommend over here is not to stop it. Maybe in some situations you want to give the developers time to build code iteratively, start looking at those findings instead of breaking the build. You notify them of vulnerabilities so that they have ample time to address those issues before it goes to the higher environments. So those are the things you can look into, and some of the effective integrations are send notifications through Slack, Teams, and other IRC channels, for example. So here are some of the other things we have noticed how it flows. Like here's an example of the tools that can be integrated in the Azure uh, cloud, and then you have Coverity for SaaS, Black Duck, for example, for the the software composition analysis, and Seeker for IAST, and so on. So there are other integrations also over there, and how you enable that integrated with the other aspects of it, like you have the agents, connectors, and the Synopsys Detect, for example, how you do that. Now with that, now the next one is how do you optimize it, right? So we just spoke about the policy engine, how you can automate those. So there's another one that I want to emphasize is intelligent orchestration. So it is all about using the right tools at the right time with the right depth and with proper capacity planning for those as well. So what it means is one example could be incremental scans. So you don't want to run a full scan for every line in code that is being changed or committed in the CI/CD pipeline. It takes sometimes these tools take enormous resources. So to be more efficient and to provide more meaningful results to the concerned stakeholders, like whether it's development team or operations team, you may want to just scan as needed. So those are the things you have to look into for intelligent orchestration. And that also integrates with the security policy. You have intelligent orchestration in the pipeline, the different workflows, and even analytics that you do. Here is the application security orchestration and correlation tools they can integrate with for security reporting. And then if you see the intelligent orchestration, we're also saying maybe you don't want to run uh, like SAST, for example, if it's really not related to a source code change. So those things only run these tools as needed or as relevant based on the changes that are being committed into the branches or the relevant source code repositories. Oops, sorry. That was my cat. And then here are some of the success stories. I got some two examples over here. The first one was when we were implementing it for a Fortune 500 telecom company. So when we looked at it, the DevSecOps program was not mature enough, but they did have an internal penetration testing team, which did some penetration testing, but they could not scale it. They had a large application portfolio. So they had a huge challenge in terms of maturing their DevSecOps culture as well. There were situations where they released code to production without proper security assurance. So they had lots of challenges. There was several gaps in the CI/CD pipeline. They didn't have the right tools to scan with, and it was very hard to integrate. So that's where we came in, did a map for them. If you look at the right side, those are the things that we look at for a current state assessment. We look at the different capabilities that the organization can invest on and or plan for incorporating into this security program. So we looked at the assessed the maturity and provided recommendations for that. So for example, after the map we provided the reference architecture for them. We kick-started some tools and even process automation for them, integrated that into the CI/CD pipeline. And we also worked with several stakeholders, looking into the friction amongst the different stakeholders and so on, and suggested some security champions program for them that can start using for it. So if you look at it, the we provided the solution, and the outcome of it was um, coming up with an implementation plan and defining their secure software development lifecycle processes. So this actually enabled the teams to have a shared responsibility model. They started incorporating the security features, different started owning the different security functions that are relevant to their um, departments or organizations. And then we also looked into customizing the reference architecture further. There were several different tools and different pipelines that we're using. So we had to customize the reference architecture to suit the specific needs of that, because they had a huge application portfolio. And this actually, the whole thing, once we started providing this recommendation and incorporating those changes, we saw a great engagement, a lot of engagement between the different teams, and started communicating in terms of assessing the vulnerabilities that were found with the different security testing that we integrated for them. So here it is. A team that were doing manual pen tests moved on to automated continuous security testing after we provided the maturity action plan for them. And here's another example. Here is for a large pharmaceutical company. The problem was, like in 2016, there was a insulin pump vulnerability that came out, and that led to the um, more focus on medical devices, supply chain, protected health information data, breaches to that, and also the other challenges we found for this company was of course, they had an immature security program, and there were far too many vulnerabilities for them to address. So the solution we provided to them was we did a BSIM assessment. It is basically about 121 activities across 12 um, practices that are under 4 domains. So we assessed them for BSIM and provided some initiatives for them to work on. So one of the outcomes of that was, again, like what I showed in the previous example, we gave them a CI/CD map, then also did threat modeling for some of their applications, so that we could assess the risk of the applications with that. So we did a threat modeling exercise to show what you can find, like in terms of attack surfaces, what are the remediation concerns they need to look into, and so on. And also further define this DevSecOps program strategy for them. And that included bringing in the software composition tools, analysis tools, the dynamic analysis tools, and static application security testing tools for them. We also had a catalog of uh, training modules we had that so most of their developers in the organization started taking on. So we were helping them with the best secure coding practices. And the outcome of this was the implementation, right? So we uh, gave them the runbooks that documented the process for automated onboarding, helping them with the triaging and writing custom rules or scan policies with the various security testing tools. So of course, what came out from that was the top 10 OWASP vulnerabilities. There were some policy engines we had for blocking critical vulnerabilities uh, from going to production. And there was also, because of this continuous security testing, there was increased coverage on the different types of vulnerabilities that were identified. That is, there was different categories of vulnerabilities that we found with the various continuous security testing tools that we use in the organization. So these are some of the things we use. It is further broken down in the static analysis deliverables that were there. And also there was a dashboard that we worked with for configuring it and presenting the results for the stakeholders. So with that, Chai, I would move it on to you for question and answer or anything else you want to add on.
Thanks, Satish. That was very interesting, and thanks for sharing that with us. Any questions? We'll be happy to please post them in the Q&A area. We'll be happy to take them right now.
So while we wait on a couple of those questions to come in, we do have one final poll. So we're going to go ahead and launch it. This poll reads, has your organization implemented the shift everywhere trend yet? And then Chai and Satish, we do have those first 3 poll results from earlier in the program. If you wanted to jump to the polls tab and look at those answers, if you see anything relevant or important to note there, we can go ahead and discuss that as well.
Sure. Yeah, Chai, do you see it?
I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So on the right side of the screen, you'll click polls and then click the open tab. You should see all the results.
Oh, okay. I don't see the results. I see the
results either.
Yeah, I just see the questions.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close the polls out so that you can see those. But
Sounds good.
While I do that, these are the results for the poll we just launched. So it looks like we have a large majority has not implemented Shift Everywhere yet.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a fairly new trend. So, and if you haven't yet implemented it, I urge you strongly to look at it because definitely vulnerabilities can creep in throughout the SDLC. So you should be testing across the SDLC, continuous security testing.
Yeah, we got some interesting poll results over here. So it looks like most of you are new to DevSecOps. About 64% have said they're new. And then, well, interestingly, about 90% of you find the DevSecOps to be effective in your organization. Great. That is nice. And 62% have DevSecOps overwhelm them.
Yep. That's interesting.
It is a daunting task. Yeah.
It is. It really is.
And of course, the last one was the top characteristics, and continuous security testing topped the list, looks like.
And metrics is a
Another
close
one.
second.
Close second. Very good. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. So we've got a question here that reads, how can threat modeling and pen testing fit into the Agile and DevSecOps methodology?
It is very interesting. So pen testing itself actually is a manual process. You do need security experts. Sometimes you need to, what the security experts do is they actually look into 2 different vulnerabilities or types of vulnerabilities to actually find an exploit. So one of the things that it can do is automated task, right? Most of those findings, what you can try to do from it can be found through automated task as well. But I'm not saying that automated task is a replacement for penetration testing. It is not, but it does help you focus on or triage those findings early on. The things that you can capture with DAST, try to capture it. And the other things, the penetration testing, are those that can be exploited from a combination of vulnerabilities. So that's why I would say both are important, but because of DAST, you may not have to run the penetration test as frequently as you may need. So that is one thing. Another one is threat modeling, and that is sometimes done on an ad hoc basis. Not many organizations do it very effectively. Sometimes it takes a lot of time and effort. Teams may not have done it during the design phase. They may actually come back later on after the application has been already deployed and running for lots of uh, who knows, several years actually, probably because I've done threat modeling on legacy applications before as well. So what we're trying to emphasize on threat modeling is threat modeling can be done as a structured approach as well. There are tools out there where you can actually do it in a very structured approach. You don't have to do it on an ad hoc basis. I've seen some places where when I say do a threat model, they just show me a wiki and tell, hey, this is our threat model. This is what we thought are the threats, and look at it. But there are tools out there, as I said, which can do threat modeling for you. I would say the things that you can automate, like follow a structured approach, which is suitable for your organization. And then once you have that structured approach, you can try to automate it. There are some tools like as maybe OWASP, the Dragon. I know it is kind of in an infancy. It's not as mature as needed, but there are other tools that you can use to automate. And that is a challenge too. I think there are organizations which are trying to do it. We are trying to do it, but it may take some time though.
True.
All right, so our next question reads, any specific training path you can recommend for those who have DevOps hands-on experience, primarily AppSec or SDLC security for DevOps?
There are some, actually, there is one organization which provides training for it, which I've seen, but honestly, I actually give DevSecOps training myself. I've given to several of our clients, and it is called Securing Software with DevSecOps. So if you're interested in any of this, we do have a catalog of training available, and we can provide it to you if you would like.
Right. What are your recommendations if someone wants to build DevSecOps, but they don't know how to define and kick off?
We just spoke about a map, a maturity action plan, which is about assessing it and seeing what is important, what are the initiatives that you need to focus on. That is a good start. The approach I've described is what you should be trying to do so that you can prioritize on the things that you actually want to have to be focusing on. So as I said, you got to assess your current state and then look at the target state and what you're trying to achieve and go by those initiatives. There are several capabilities that you can use within your organization. It could be like in the DevSecOps is not just about automation, right? It's a culture, and there's so many other things. There may be training needed. Uh, there's also, as I said, security champions that you may want to look into for an organization. But as an individual, I don't know what you're looking for. Are you looking at expertise in terms of building continuous security testing in the DevSecOps pipeline or not? Maybe that's what you're looking for. Then there are resources out there. So depending on what orchestration tools you're using or what kind of security testing you need to be following, I think that's one way to look into it. There are several open source tools or commercial security testing tools available that you can look into and start incorporating it into your pipeline.
All right, well, Satish and Chai, that looks like it's all the time we have today. We did receive one more question, and they did just want you, Satish, to reiterate what you said about your catalog. How can they access that catalog of training?
Sure, we can. I'll probably post a link out there later. And we have a lot of, like when I say catalog training, one thing as mentioned was securing software with DevSecOps. Another one is OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, open source um, analysis. There's a training material available for that too that we provide. So if you want, I can refer you to our ILT director for that catalog. We do have one available we provide to clients. So maybe I can send it to you sometime and then you can post it out as well.
Okay, and to the participant that asked that, we do have your, it is obscured in the platform, but we do have your email address and your questions tracked. So we'll get that over to them and hopefully they can reach out to you after the fact.
Thanks, Cody.
Of course. Well, Chai and Satish, thank you both so much for
Thank you.
joining me. I'd like to remind our audience that this session was recorded. So should you want to rewatch, or maybe you had to miss the beginning, or maybe you're not here and you missed the end and you just need to rewatch something that you missed, the recording will be made on demand shortly after we conclude our session. You'll be receiving that link via email, or of course you can find it living on the Security Boulevard website at securityboulevard.com/webinars. At the top of the hour, I promised we'd give away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So our winners are Jane K, Niraj K, Karthika S, and Marcus D. So to our 4 winners, please keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. You should get that email in about 48 hours, if not sooner. And also check your spam folder if you don't get it, just in case it gets filtered out. I'd like to thank Synopsys for sponsoring our program. And to our audience, thank you so much for your participation with our polls and for engaging with us in chat throughout our program today. We really appreciate your time, and we also want to hear your feedback about our program. So right after we close out, there will be a survey that pops up. Let us know what you thought, or maybe what you'd like to see on an upcoming program. Either way, we would like to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and Chai, Satish, thank you both once more.
Thank you, Cody. Have a good one.